I chose to resign, and then of course Helimission was there, and I was friends with Brian and Hans and the pilots there, and they were urging me even before to switch to Helimission. So obviously this was the door opening.
Hey guys, thanks for checking out Flight by Faith. I'm gonna keep this introduction short and sweet because this video is already a little bit longer than what we would prefer to make. So we started on this journey with Flight by Faith about a year and a half ago, and already we've moved around quite a bit. And what we see in the future is us moving around quite a bit more. And one of the things that has made this journey so special already is some of the people that we've met along the way. And we figured that a great way to share in this with you would be to introduce you to some of those people. And so we've decided to start this series within the Flight by Faith channel called Flight by Faith Heroes, where we sit down with people that we meet along the way that are either particularly inspiring or just maybe have some particularly compelling story to tell. And the first person I want to introduce you to is a guy named Tom Hans. Tom is a guy that when I first started pursuing Helimission 10 years ago, I was told you have to meet Tom. And he was a helicopter pilot on the field in Indonesia for 14 years with Helimission. He's also a fixed wing pilot. He's a licensed aircraft mechanic. I think he's even an EMT. And his resume goes on, but what you'll notice about Tom, first and foremost, is his incredible humility and his servant's heart. And so I've divided this video actually up into two parts. The first video is going to be his story of how he got to the field with Helimission, because as you can tell in our own lives, getting to Helimission is a pretty tedious process in and of itself, and his story is a little bit different than ours, and so I wanted him to be able to share that with you. And the second video is going to be of the joys and the challenges that he faced while he was on the field with Helimission in Indonesia. And so without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce you to my friend Tom Hans.
Tom Hans. I was born in Chicago, but I grew up in southern Indiana, a small country town called Worthington, 100 miles north of Evansville. I think you know where that is. Yeah, it was, I thought it was a big advantage to grow up in a small school because of the size. There were 32 people in my class, so it gives you the opportunity to play sports and you don't have to be that great, you know. And, so yeah, but very sheltered life, I guess. Didn't have a lot of exposure to the world. I didn't get interested in aviation until I was in college. And because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up and was unsure, yeah, I thought the Army would be a great place to start. And it was. But at that time, the way the Army did it is while in ROTC, they essentially sent you to the local airport where you got a private license through the local FBO, fixed base operator. And so I did that and trained in a Cessna 172, got a private pilot's license, and yeah, then after you finish that, the commitment from the Army was, well, if offered flight school, you would be obligated to go to flight school, rotary wing flight school in the Army. So yeah, I fell in love with aviation pretty soon. But then the Army, so that September of 93, no, September 73, 1973, it was time to join the Army. So everything I owned, I put in my little Volkswagen Beetle and went off to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and went to the engineer officer basic course. After that, it was time for flight school. So at Fort Rucker, Alabama, it's a 9-month program. So I finished rotary wing flight school with the Army. I was number 2 in the class, so it seemed easy to me. But yeah, I enjoyed it. First flight assignment was in Korea. I got fortunate for a second lieutenant. Most in the Army, if you don't know, most of the pilots are warrant officers that do the day-to-day flying, and commissioned officers are more managers. But I was fortunate that I got to fly a lot, and I think I flew 1,000 hours the first year as a second lieutenant in, you know, so gained time in the Huey and the OH-58 in Korea. The last few years in the Army, you know, the question, well, what's Chapter 2 going to be? And so the last job I had in the Army, I had the opportunity to get it was a design project, and the architect engineer firm was in California. One time I took leave after this temporary duty trip out for a design review, and I went to Mission Aviation Fellowship headquarters. It was in Redlands, California then. So after I retired from the Army in '93, I went to LeTourneau as a 42-year-old freshman. I wore my little beanie and tried to fit in with the other freshmen there. And again, got great experience. They gave me a break. I wasn't after a degree. I already had a master's degree, so I just wanted the A&P license and the commercial instrument airplane rating. I was already commercial instrument helicopter, but I wasn't commercial instrument airplane. So I finished that, went to MAF headquarters for a field orientation, and then it was time for deputation. And so normally deputation can take years or so. That's finding your team of supporters. That was a faith-building lesson there as well, because you feel kind of inadequate. I'm asking people for money and donations. This was a new thing. Within 6 months, we were fully supported, and we were assigned to Indonesia. Why Indonesia? Because at that time, MAF had 2 helicopters in their fleet. They were in several countries, but only in Wama was the helicopter program. So the plan was I was going to do both helicopter and airplane. Well, shortly after that, I was still doing orientation in the fixed-wing program first, but the MAF had an accident with one of their Hughes 500s. And then there was a drought in the country, and Helimission was invited in by the governor to help with the drought relief. So, yeah, it was agreed upon between MAF and Helimission that MAF would get out of helicopters and Helimission would do all the helicopter things. So, I was disappointed at first, because most of my experience was helicopters, but I'd made a commitment to MAF, and so, okay, I guess I'm going to fly airplanes. Well, not by choice, but in the end of 2001, I had an accident, fixed-wing accident. It was pilot error, overconfident, lack of awareness, I guess, but mainly overconfidence and, like all accidents, a series of mistakes. So a landing accident essentially demolished the 206, but fortunately myself and the 4 passengers I had, I was the worst injured with some lacerations in my leg and my face, but yeah. Long story short, the solution to that was MAF felt it was best that I not fly airplanes again as a single pilot, so I could have been reassigned, but I chose to resign. And then, of course, Helimission was there, and I was friends with Brian and Hans and the pilots there, and they were urging me even before to switch to Helimission. So obviously, this was the door opening, so actually it was a blessing in disguise. So within a month or so after the accident, Ernie invited me to Switzerland, and that was kind of a unique event. I was in Jakarta not knowing I was going to fly out of there. I didn't even have a long pair of pants, and so I flew to Germany in December, and Ernie picked me up at the airport, and I had shorts, and he brought me one of his jackets, and the sleeves came to here, but so he had arranged a check flight with Heli Swiss, and flew a Bell 206 Jet Ranger up, on the high peaks and high ranges there in Switzerland. So a quick introduction. So that went well, and so I immediately started with people that I knew, Hans Kummer and Brian Smith there on the team. We land, and they're not around, but then they'd heard the helicopter coming, and so they come, you see them in the distance come running, and they got weapons, and I firing weapons in the air, and I think at even one point a guy pointed at me and fired a pinched off a round. Well, I think all they had were blanks, fortunately at that time.